Welcome to this edition of Real World Employment Law, where we discuss real-world employment issues impacting companies and executives. I'm Declan Leonard. I'm managing partner here at Berenzweig Leonard. I also head up the employment law practice here at the firm.
I'm Seth Berenzweig. I'm also partner at Berenzweig Leonard, co-managing partner. And what are we here to talk about today, Declan? There's really nothing major going on in the world,
exactly.
is there?
I mean, the same thing we've been talking about for the last, about 18 months.
Right.
COVID in the workplace. The only difference between it is normally you're on cable TV talking to such hotshots like you got Neil Cavuto and Shepard Smith. So today you're kind of slumming it with me here.
No, now I finally get to, well, I got to be careful because I want to go back on the show, so I don't want to diss anybody. Hi, Neil. Hi, Shep.
We're going
love
off,
you.
We're going off camera for this one. I need to hear some of the stories.
No, I love everybody. But no, it's great to be here. And obviously, I think that one of the things that's unique about today is that there was a lot of confusing news coming out over the last couple of days. So the whole bottom line on what's going on is as clear as mud. And I think that we're here to just be able to have busy executives just sit down for a few minutes, and then we can just set the record straight on a lot of this stuff.
So let's talk about that. So you and I were going to do this video podcast on Friday, and I think we got busy, and eventually we probably ended up at happy hour. But so it's a good thing we actually waited, because what happened was there was kind of a bit of a seismic event with the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals issuing an injunction. What was that all about?
So a lot of messages this weekend from a bunch of people saying, so is the mandate dead? Does this apply to federal government contractors? So here's what happened. In the middle of the afternoon on Saturday, there was breaking news that said that the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, one step below the U.S. Supreme Court, issued an order. And I don't think it's going to be readable by anybody, but it's pretty short. It's right here. It's really all of about a page long. And what it basically says is that the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, the court here based in Louisiana, has concluded that there may be a fundamental constitutional issue with respect to whether OSHA had the authority to do what it did regarding the regulations on private employers with 100 plus employees. So what they did is they put a temporary freeze, a stay on that, with an urgent expedited briefing schedule. Government's briefs due 5 p.m. Monday. Government's and the reply due the next day. Decision, I'm thinking maybe by Friday. So big fly in the ointment, big decision, and that's what's going to be coming up over the next couple of days.
And so this is a source of a lot of the confusion, and rightly so. You know, our clients, contact us and say,
"What's going on?
Are we sort of on hold too?" And so, I think it's critical at the outset of this podcast, Seth, that we differentiate between the various mandates that have come down.
Right.
And the two that we're going to be talking about today are, there's a mandate for federal contractors. Doesn't matter how many employees.
Federal government contractors.
Federal government contractors.
Right.
If you do work for the federal government, we're going to simplify it here. But basically, there is an absolute requirement for a mandate unless you can fall into the religious or medical exception for that. And we've been fielding a lot of calls about how we determine those. So what we're going to be talking about here today, nothing that happened in the last couple of days, including on Saturday, that does not change what federal contractors have to do. Is that correct?
That's right. There are two general categories of companies with regulations. Federal government contractors, they were not touched this weekend by the Fifth Circuit decision. And then separately, the private employers, the commercial companies that have 100 or more employees, they were affected by what happened on Saturday, because in that tunnel of regulations, that's what was put on hold. So one of the misnomers of, and just to be very clear in terms of what the differentiation is on those two pipes, federal government contracts, we hear the word mandate. In the federal government contract space, it is a straight mandate. Unless you fall into two very narrow accommodation exceptions, vaccination mandate across the board. But if you're a private company, it is not a mandate, or what I might call mandate light, which means that provided the employer gives the authority to do that under a policy, then people can either get vaccinated or have weekly testing.
Okay. And so when you have a government contractor, this is where somebody could easily get confused.
Sure.
You're a government contractor that has 150 employees. Well, you've got one set of regulations that says absolute mandate, and then you're also 100 employee plus. So you're under that mandate light. So maybe there's an opportunity for testing, no?
No, I think at that point, if you are doing business with the federal government, that controls.
Yep.
You are agreeing to the FAR flow-down clauses. You are agreeing to do business with the government, even if it is a small fraction of your business. Look at the commercial airlines. They are stuck with the mandate because they do some work with the federal government. If you have a part of your business, in whole or in part, doing business with the feds, you have a mandate for vaccination across the board. And similarly, not only is it correct to say that what happened this weekend has no effect on you, it is also incorrect to say that the regulations are going to come into effect in a month or two. That is a misnomer. The regulations are in effect immediately. The dates for compliance, which are in December and January, that's the date by which compliance has to be achieved. So everything is happening right now, especially in the federal government contract space.
So if you're a federal contractor, there was one update late last week that I think we should pass on. And then candidly, if you're a federal contractor, much of what we're going to talk about, I mean, I know you love hearing our voices and everything, and you'll stay tuned, but much of what we're going to be talking about is really for those employers with 100 and plus employees. But
private employers.
Private employers, yeah. But what was important, I think, last week is they changed the deadline. The deadline for federal contractors to be vaccinated was December 8th, and they actually pushed it to January 4th because that conformed with the 100-plus employee thing. And they wanted at least, I mean, while these two, as you just mentioned, while these two requirements between federal contractors and 100-plus employee companies are quite different because of the testing option that the 100 and plus employees have. At least the deadlines, January 4th, is now the magic date.
So can you help us understand, what does that mean? So if I'm a CEO of a federal government contractor, or I'm CFO, HR department, what have you, and then I hear they're in effect now, and then I have to be compliant by January, what does that mean as a practical matter? What are the things that have to be happening today at the company to get the wheels rolling so that everything is moving ahead and they're not going to get in trouble with the feds?
And so many of our clients have been knee-deep in this for weeks, if not months. Ascertain who is and who is not vaccinated, okay? And then for those, you really just have to communicate to your employees that, listen, there's a process to get vaccinated. It's not like you snap your finger and all of a sudden, hey, I'm vaccinated on January 4th, got an appointment to take it on January 4th. I mean, I guess it could happen with Johnson & Johnson, but really what you have to do is you've got to make sure that you're fully vaccinated by that date. Or conversely, you go through a process where you try to seek a religious or a medical exception. We've been helping our clients go through this. You fill out forms. It's a tough process, and you noted at the very beginning, it's really a pretty narrow process by which people were going to get these exceptions.
Yeah, the exemptions are very, very narrow, and but one of the other things that you just noted, which I think is really important, you have these declaration or affirmation forms that have to be filled out by the employees. That process is going to take a couple of weeks. You have to get the information. You have to send out the forms. They're going to come back. There are going to be objections. There are going to be validation of requests for exemptions. That's going to take at least a month. So there are things that have to happen right now. So when the media says these aren't going to be effective for a while, absolutely, completely wrong.
No, absolutely. So I think we can now, because it's so important, because this is the number one confusion, federal contractors not really impacted, other than the extension of the date to January 4th of next year, not really impacted. Let's make it clear that now we're moving on and talking about what's been happening. OSHA
for the private sector, commercial companies,
100 plus employees. OSHA came in and they issued these emergency rules. Sometimes OSHA goes through this convoluted process of rulemaking.
Separate emergency rules that are totally different from the feds.
Totally. And so those come into play, and that basically said, look, companies, we're going to do something a little different than we did with federal contractors. We're going to say you have the option to require your entire workforce to become vaccinated, or if you want, you got to put all this in a written policy, or you can also offer the option of testing. And so that's
weekly.
it's got to be weekly testing. Employee pays for it. And so
unless
really
the company feels like otherwise, that they're willing to pay for it.
That's right. Or unless there's some other state law that comes into play, or a union contract or an agreement.
Sure.
So that is what is gotten the attention of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. And the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, what did they do this weekend?
So the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, in a one-page decision, said that there are serious enough issues of constitutional questions to put it on freeze, on hold, or what's known as a stay. And the government and the reply is going to all be filed this week. The decision may come as early as Thursday or Friday of this week. But the other thing that is happening in the background is that half of the other federal circuits, as of the day of our taping today, have also suddenly received the same kind of legal challenge.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen is, by the middle of this month, there's going to be a consolidation and literally a lottery where they're going to pick one circuit court to consolidate and tee up a final expedited ruling that's going to apply to everything. So one of the other fallacies that's coming up in the media is that although this may make its way to the Supreme Court, these things happen very slowly. That, again, completely incorrect. What happens now is that the circuit courts are going to be making decisions, including the Fifth Circuit, as early as this Friday. There will overall be a consolidation of all these cases within one circuit that's going to be making one overriding decision within a couple of weeks. And then the loser of that is almost certainly going to go to the Supreme Court. Bottom line, we're probably going to have a Supreme Court ruling, I would think, by the end of this year.
So the whole issue factors on this phrase grave danger. So the only way that OSHA can skip over its usually lengthy 1 year plus rulemaking process is if they can show this is an emergency. There is a grave danger here.
Right.
And so there are some people that are saying, listen, we've been going through COVID for the last 18 plus months. We've had the ups and downs. We've had it under control. Then we get the Delta variant. But why are we in a grave danger situation now in November of 2021 when some people would say we're hopefully at the tail end?
Well, are we at the tail end? I mean, I think that what you've just articulated is a lot of the argument of what these opponents are going to be saying. They're going to say, look, where's the fire? This has been going on for a year and a half. You suddenly issue these emergency regulations. Because they're emergency regulations, which you decided the OSHA to do it that way, you have to meet a grave danger standard. It has to be a grave danger, and the regulations have to be able to be directed towards curing that grave danger. But where's the fire? Because everything's working out. And what they will respond is, that's ridiculous. More than 750,000 people are dead. Roughly 1,000 people a day, roughly, are dying of COVID. If OSHA has the authority to regulate people not going into rooms with asbestos, if OSHA has the authority to tell people if you're walking near a construction site, wear a hard hat, they have the authority to rule that in terms of workplace health and safety, that there should be a vaccination program in place. And they'll argue it's even softer because you don't even have to get vaccinated. You can also have the company authorize testing.
So let's talk about, nobody knows where the court's going to come down on this. And there are good arguments perhaps on both sides from a legal standpoint. Keep in mind, this is a process argument. I mean, we love to talk about things being a lot sexier than they are, but it's really, at the end of the day, a process argument. The question is, did OSHA jump
overstep
over the
its
rules
bounds
and do this on an emergency basis? Should they have gone through their normal rulemaking process? So let's put aside the litigation for now, because we don't know how that's going to come about. Employers, let's just assume it is reinstated. We don't know. We don't have a crystal ball, but let's assume it's reinstated. If you're an employer, should you choose to just say mandates across the board, as they're able to do, or should they be more flexible and say, you know what, we'll do vaccines if you want to, but you can also do testing if you want to too. Talk about some of the pros and cons of that approach.
Well, first of all, if you're going to try to make a bet that these regs are going to go away and that you just put everything down on your desk and go get a beer, good luck with that, because I think that's going to be a little bit risky. At the end of the day, there's going to be a little bit of short-term lack of clarity, but regardless of what happens, there's no national stay that's clearly in place right now. In order for employers to be best protected, the smartest thing to do, in my view, is to look at it from a standpoint of what's going on in the country right now. We have a national labor shortage. We have people who are trying to get back into the office.
See, this is key, yeah.
Yeah, you have a national labor shortage. You have great people, and you don't want to strong-arm them. The companies in the private sector have a unique opportunity opportunity at play. From an HR standpoint, they can say, I'm not issuing a vaccination mandate. It is not a vaccination mandate. You can either get vaccinated or you can get tested weekly. And then if you want to choose, then you can go ahead and do that. And in that way, the best and brightest in your company are going to feel less like they're being forced into something. It's not a get jabbed or get axed. It's just let's go ahead and get ready, and people will feel that it's a more collaborative approach and that they're not being dictated to.
But isn't testing, I mean, with vaccine mandates, it's just kind of like a one-size-fits-all. It's like, just go do it, and I just don't want to hear what you have to say. But
Right.
isn't testing kind of like a pain in the you-know-what? I mean, it's going to be administrative. I mean, it's weekly testing. Somebody's going to have to be collecting these from, and if you have a workforce, well, we're all talking about over 100 employees, so this can go way, way up. Like, why should companies go through that?
Well, I think they have to. I think they have to be ready to make this happen, because if you don't go through the steps now, by the time the date goes into effect with regard to compliance, you're not going to be able to get there. It's going to be too much of a sprint and too limited of a time. And again, I think that the biggest objection is whether or not someone's going to be forced to get a needle in the arm. And what's not being covered in the mainstream media is that for private employers, which represent almost 100 million people in the United States workforce, there is no vaccination mandate. It is a mandate of a policy that either requires vaccination or weekly testing. And look, no one likes to get poked all the way up their nose, halfway up to their brain. I've had that. I don't like it. It's not fun.
Yeah, definitely not.
But it's quick. It's easy, it's reliable, and it promotes health and safety in the workplace. So there's a lot more flexibility on this than meets the eye.
So it sounds to me like there's a balance between full vaccination, which could be easier, and again, we'll be broken records here, but
companies may want to do that.
For federal contractors, that's the only choice.
No choice.
Let's continue to be broken record on that one. But you could argue, I guess, that by offering a testing option, you might have a better chance of keeping talent in the workplace,
and
because
complying.
It is a tough hiring market right now.
Right.
Everybody's experiencing it. We're hearing it from our clients, and so the last thing you want to do is to allow these regulations to get in the way so that you start losing some valuable talent. So maybe that's an argument for flexibility.
So let me ask you a question or two. I know that you've been dealing with you've been basically at the front of the spear in terms of helping companies, including government contractors, address a lot of these exemption requests.
Yes.
Can you provide a little bit of an explanation of what those are looking like when they come in? And is that a difficult process to try to nail down? Because it seems to me, I hear a lot of CEOs are saying, I'm very nervous about trying to determine whether someone's religious convictions are genuinely held convictions. It's a real sensitive wire.
Oh, yeah. So, and to be clear, we've now moved back to federal contractors.
Right.
Because when it comes to, I guess it would still also apply to the 100-plus private sector companies, too.
If they want an exemption,
because if they wanted an exemption,
Sure.
yeah. So we're going to see those all around, yes. Those, Seth, have been unbelievably eye-opening, particularly the religious ones, because, I've been doing this 25 years. I have not had many religious accommodation cases. I talked to a lot of people. We just finished heading up the Bar Association Employment Law section, so we talk about these issues all the time, and it's really, really rare to have these come up. They're not very prevalent, religious exceptions for accommodations. But oh my God, we've been inundated with these, because the medical ones are different. Medical, you're going to have a doctor that's going to come in.
Objective medical evidence.
Yeah. As we say, we're not playing doctor here when we're deciding these. But for religious ones, you've got to look at like what they're writing, and people have written incredibly personal things, like multiple pages, and you're just like, well, who am I to decide what's a sincerely held religious belief?
Which is part of the legal standard. It has to be a sincerely held religious belief to apply, but then you're actually literally looking at someone's sincerity about asserting a religious objection, which is hard. Sure.
I mean, without getting into too much detail, is witchcraft a sincerely held religious belief? We had to deal with that somewhat recently.
Really?
So yeah. So we're seeing all of these things, and so it really puts, I will say, it's put our company clients in a really difficult position, because they don't want, first off, they don't want to to get that much. It's TMI from their
Yeah.
employees. They're like,
Yeah.
I don't want to know this much about you and your personal beliefs.
Yeah.
You always say, don't talk politics and religion in the workplace. And now
All of a
we're
sudden,
talking, and many
right.
times these things are coming in with a combination of religion and politics intertwined.
Sure,
And so it really makes it
sure.
tough. I mean, the hardest thing is, we're hoping that there's more flexibility coming out from the federal government as we implement these things, because I think the federal government's recognizing, look, we have a very strong goal of getting as many people vaccinated. We also have a competing goal of not letting people get laid off from their jobs. And so I think the federal government is starting
Yeah.
to backtrack a little bit and say they've already extended the deadline.
Yeah.
They're already telling companies, look, as you go through this process, don't be so quick to
Yeah.
put somebody on leave, unpaid leave particularly, because guess
Right.
what that does? It puts them on the unemployment rolls. Not good for the administration.
And I think that as a business law firm, one of the things that we've really been trying to focus on is to try to apply in the most flexible way. There are a lot of really good people working with really good firms doing really great work. To apply a dictionary-like approach to this stuff would be ridiculous. You have to try to be as flexible and realistic as you can. But and I know that our time is about to wrap up. But where do you see this going? I mean, you have this uncertainty. You have people that are fighting through it. You have HR directors and CXOs that are just dealing with this on a daily basis. How is this going to deploy between now and the end of the year?
I don't think, and I think it'll go on beyond the end of the year, but I still think that there's such an overriding zeal from this administration to get as many people vaccinated as possible. And one way they've been able to do that is through these workforce mandates. You just
Right.
can't pick people off of the street, but you can corral them a little bit better when it comes to the workforce. They're easily able to do it when you do work for the federal government because it's a contractual, contingency
It's a
for you
flow
to do
down.
it.
Yeah.
And now they're using the new rules to try to target larger employers, 100 plus.
Right.
I think if I'm an employer, I don't look at any of the stuff that happened this weekend or last week or any of these variations.
Right.
I think the groundswell is still 100% towards getting as many people vaccinated as possible. And if
Yeah.
I was a company, I would continue along that road
Yeah.
but by the same token, trying to be flexible so that you don't lose workers, you don't lose valuable employees, but you still show that from a good faith standpoint, because that's what the government keeps talking about, good faith,
Yeah.
that you show that you're doing more than lip service, you're actually working towards the same goal that the government's looking for.
Yeah, in conclusion, I think that, and I would have a similar thought, just keep big picture. Just stay on the big picture.
100%.
This is something, it's going to happen. It will probably go to the Supreme Court. It will probably be upheld. And there'll be a lot of twists and turns, and there'll be a lot of misinformation that's going to be out there. But just stay focused and stay big picture. The faster that you're able to implement this, and the more flexible you are from an HR standpoint, keep your best and brightest, keep everybody working, keep your revenues up. Our model is always cost down, revenues up approach. And if this is done in a good faith way, as you've said, then everything's going to work out in the end.
Yeah, I feel like, Seth, that we almost have to put a disclaimer on this one. I feel like we have to put a timestamp on this, because had we done this on Friday,
I know.
we would have been completely irrelevant right now.
Right.
It is, Todd, what's the day today? It's Monday,
Yeah.
November 8th. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're watching this on Wednesday, the 10th,
Don't listen to it.
Don't email me if we're wrong. So Seth, this will not be the last time we get into the studio on this. We may be back in later this week. But anyways, this was a great opportunity. Clear up some of the misconceptions that are out there, so that companies who are out there, trying to build their businesses and not, become
Get stuck in the drama.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So anyways, great discussion. Thank everybody. Thank you all for joining us for this edition of Real World Employment Law, and stay tuned for the next one.